The glass between worlds. The heavy rain battered the windows of the office, a monotonous, relentless sound that matched the pounding rhythm in Julian's head. He stared at the screen in front of him, the rows of numbers and emails mocking him with their lifelessness. The same task, the same office, the same cubicle. Each day bled into the next, and he wondered how much longer he could stand it. Julian, a man of 28, was trapped in a life that felt too small for him. He had been living in a constant fog, his passions buried beneath the weight of deadlines and responsibilities. No matter how hard he tried, nothing seemed to ignite a spark inside him. He felt like he was fading, just another face in the crowd. And deep down, he was starting to believe he might never escape this numbness. But life, as it often does, has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. One evening, after yet another soul-crushing day at work, Julian stumbled across a flyer pinned to the community bulletin board as he walked through his apartment building's lobby. The flyer was simple, printed in bold, bright letters. Glass painting workshop. Unleash your creativity. He paused, his finger hovering over the edge of the paper. He had never done anything creative in his life. In fact, he couldn't remember the last time he had done anything purely for the sake of enjoyment. But for some reason, this flyer spoke to him in a way nothing else had before. It called to a part of him that had been dormant for years. He had no reason to go, and yet, without really thinking about it, he signed up. The workshop was held at an old, creaky building a few blocks from his apartment. He could hear the faint clinking of glass as he pushed open the door, stepping into a room filled with natural light streaming through the tall windows. A long wooden table sat at the center of the room, covered with glass sheets, paints, and brushes. The scent of fresh paint hung in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of the wooden beams that supported the ceiling. Julian hesitated at the doorway, suddenly unsure if he had made the right decision. But then, a woman with soft brown hair and a warm smile approached him. You must be Julian. Welcome to the workshop. I'm Elise, she said, extending a hand. Her smile was genuine, and it eased the tension in his chest.
Alisa.
Thanks for letting me join. I'm not sure what I'm doing here, but Julian trailed off, feeling self-conscious. No need to worry, Elise reassured him, her voice calm and inviting. This workshop is about exploration, not perfection. You'll see, it's all about letting your imagination guide you. Julian smiled awkwardly, but there was something about her energy that made him feel, for the first time in a long while, like he belonged. As the session began, Elise explained the basic techniques of glass painting, showing them how to gently apply the paint to the transparent surface to create colorful designs. Julian watched carefully, trying to follow her instructions, but as soon as he picked up a brush, something strange happened. It wasn't the paint or the glass that held his attention. It was the way his mind suddenly cleared. The noise of the world outside disappeared, and all that mattered was the motion of the brush and the vibrant colors taking shape before him. He started with simple patterns, unsure of what to make, but gradually, something began to stir within him. His mind, which had been consumed by the mundane grind of his job, felt alive. He painted a small flower, a swirl of red, orange, and yellow, then added more shapes, a crescent moon, a delicate vine, an abstract pattern. Each stroke felt like a small revelation, a step away from the life he had been trapped in. At the end of the class, as Elise walked around to inspect everyone's work, she stopped by Julian's station. She studied his painting in silence for a moment, and then, with a small nod, she said, "You have a unique style. You should continue." Julian was stunned. For the first time in years, someone had taken an interest in what he was doing. He hadn't even realized how much he needed that validation. Elise's words lingered in his mind as he walked home that evening, the rain now a gentle patter against his umbrella. In the weeks that followed, Julian became a regular at Elise's workshop. Every Saturday, he immersed himself in the world of glass painting, discovering new techniques and experimenting with different colors and textures. He found himself getting lost in the process, his mind free of the constant worries and stress that had once consumed him. The more he painted, the more he realized that this was his passion. It wasn't just a hobby. It was his escape, his therapy, his reason to wake up every day with a sense of purpose. But as his skills grew, so did his confidence. He started to believe that maybe he wasn't meant to live a life of numbers and spreadsheets. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was meant to be an artist. Yet, as with all passions, there were challenges. Julian's decision to pursue art full-time was met with resistance from his family and friends. They couldn't understand why he would give up the stability of his job to chase a dream that seemed so impractical. They told him it was a risk, a fantasy, something he should grow out of. But the more they doubted him, the more determined Julian became. He quit his job and, with a mixture of fear and excitement, he set out to build his career as an artist. It wasn't easy. The first few months were tough. He struggled to find clients, and his art didn't always sell the way he hoped. There were nights when he would lie awake, wondering if he had made the right choice. But then, something extraordinary happened. One day, a renowned art gallery in the city saw one of his glass paintings at a local exhibit. They were immediately intrigued by the unique way he blended colors and shapes, creating a surreal, dreamlike quality to his work. They offered him a solo show. Julian was overwhelmed. His dream was coming true. The night of the show, the gallery was packed with people. Julian stood at the back of the room, watching as visitors marveled at his work. It was surreal, like something out of a dream. His paintings were beautiful, yes, but they also felt like windows into another world, worlds that didn't adhere to the rules of logic and reason, where magic and reality coexisted. It wasn't long before Julian's reputation as an artist grew. He received commissions from clients around the world, and his work was showcased in galleries from New York to Paris. But as his success expanded, he began to feel a growing unease, an unsettling sense that something was wrong. He started having strange dreams where the glass paintings he had created came to life, where the figures and shapes he had painted moved and shifted in ways that defied physics. The dreams felt real, too real, as if the worlds he had created in his art were somehow bleeding into his reality. One night, after an especially vivid dream, Julian woke up to find one of his glass paintings had changed. The moon he had painted, which had once been a pale yellow, was now a deep, glowing red. He stared at it in disbelief. He had no memory of altering the painting, but there it was, staring back at him with its new, unsettling hue. As he reached out to touch it, a shiver ran down his spine. The glass was warm, as though it had been alive. Days passed, and strange things began to happen. Objects in his studio would move on their own, and he would hear whispers when no one was around. But it wasn't until he received a letter from Elise that things truly began to spiral. The letter was handwritten in a beautiful, flowing script, and it contained only one line: "You've unlocked the door, Julian. Now, you must choose whether to enter." The words sent a chill down his spine. What door? And what did Elise mean by enter? He tried to ignore it, but the strange occurrences continued. His paintings grew more vivid, more alive, as if the characters he had created were trying to reach out to him, to draw him into their world. One night, as he worked late into the evening, he found himself standing before the red moon painting. His hand hovered over it, the desire to touch it overwhelming. When his fingers brushed against the glass, he felt a jolt, as though electricity had surged through him. And then, something unbelievable happened. The painting began to crack, the glass splitting down the middle like a fragile window shattering. Through the crack, Julian saw a dark, swirling vortex. Without thinking, he stepped forward. The next thing he knew, he was falling through a tunnel of colors and lights, twisting and turning until he landed softly on a bed of grass. The world around him was unfamiliar, yet strangely familiar, as though he had stepped into one of his own paintings. The sky above him was a kaleidoscope of vibrant hues, and the trees were made of glass, their trunks and leaves shimmering in the light. He stood up, his heart pounding in his chest, and looked around. This was the world of his art, the world he had created in his dreams. And yet it felt real. Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Elise standing there, her eyes warm but filled with a deep, knowing sadness. "You've entered," she said softly, "but now you must understand the price." "What do you mean?" Julian asked, his voice trembling. "Every world you create is real, Julian. And every world has consequences," Elise explained. "You've opened a door between the realms, and now you must decide whether to return to your own world or stay here, where your art will live forever." Julian's heart raced. He looked at the world around him, at the creatures and landscapes he had once painted, and felt a deep sense of peace. This was where he truly belonged. But he also knew that he could never leave behind the people he loved, the life he had built. With a heavy heart, he took Elise's hand, knowing that the choice he made would shape the rest of his life. "You can return," she whispered, "but remember, your art will always be with you. It will never let you forget." Julian stepped back into his studio, the door to the other world closing behind him. The glass paintings on his walls glowed softly in the dim light, and for the first time in years, he felt a sense of belonging. He had found his true calling, and in doing so, he had unlocked a world of endless possibility, a world where the lines between reality and fantasy were forever blurred. From that day forward, Julian's paintings continued to captivate and inspire those who saw them, but he knew that the true magic lay in the unseen, in the worlds that existed just beyond the glass. And every time he picked up a brush, he was reminded of the price of creation, the price of stepping through the door and embracing the unknown. The world outside was still the same, but for Julian, everything had changed.
Whispering echoes.